Hello everyone, I am Kelly O'Neill and I am thrilled to welcome you to this tutorial which is called Bend But Don't Break, which I think is good advice in so many different phases of life, but it is certainly, I think, an essential piece of advice or caution for the budding or seasoned digital humanist, and I think we should get right to it. My name is Kelly O'Neill. I'm a historian by training. I'm a historian of the Russian Empire. When left to my own devices, I work on the 18th century, but I do tolerate other centuries when necessary. I am the director of something called the Imperiia project, which is a historical GIS, or an attempt by an incredibly multidisciplinary team that includes graduate students and undergraduate students and librarians and data scientists and geographers and all kinds of amazing people who help me in my quest to build a spatial history of the Russian Empire. And maybe a better way to say that is just that I make a lot of maps, maps of the past, and try to understand the history both through maps of the times, but also through the making of maps. Which I find to be an incredibly productive scholarly pursuit. So I am here to talk to you about an experience that I have had in my work as a digital humanist. And that work has to do with something that is very material. And it's a source that I got my hands on probably about 10 years ago. It is a set of geographic playing cards of the Russian Empire that were made in 1856. And they are absolutely glorious. They are an amazing visual source for teaching Russian history. I would like to give you just a sense of, here you can get kind of a thumbnail look at what some of them, well, what they all look like. I'm going to click on one of the cards so that you can see what it contains. And you'll see you're looking at essentially two images, the obverse and the reverse sides of the card that I've kind of stitched together so that those who are using them or looking at them can see both sides at the same time in a digital environment. The cards themselves were produced in Russia, and they were digitized through a collaboration between the Russian National Library and the Library of Congress. So they are publicly available through the Library of Congress website, which is where I found them. They contain just an incredible wealth of information about the Russian Empire. It's almost like you have the whole empire in the palm of your hand, right? If you can imagine holding this stack of 77 playing cards, 77 because at the time they were made, there were 77 provinces of the empire. So one province, one card. And as you can see on the image here, even if you can't read Russian, you can kind of get a sense of what's going on. The cards give you the name of the province. They give you a kind of a schematic map of the province with adjacent provinces and town locations. In the lower corner, you get an ethnographic depiction of one of the kinds of peoples who inhabit the province. You get a coat of arms. You get a text block that enumerates all of the different ethnic groups that inhabit the province. There are pictorial representations of major geographical features and economic activities. So in the case of this card that we're looking at here, which shows the very far eastern part of the Russian Empire, Chukotka and Kamchatka in the North Pacific, you can see there are volcanoes, right? This card is all about volcanoes and Samoyedi and these exotic kinds of places and activities. There's a little depiction of a hunting, of animal hunting in the lower corner there. There's a shipbuilding forest, there's fishing. And then there are these texts that go around the outside of each card. And the texts just pack in all kinds of information about population, the distance of the provincial capital from St. Petersburg and from Moscow, the area of the province, and there are notes on climate, on soil quality, on trade. It's just an incredible wealth of information. And when I stumbled across these cards, I thought to myself, I simply need to find a way to bring these, to use these in the classroom and to mine them for information, but really to use them, to make them both accessible and usable, right? And see what kinds of use I can put them to, both in terms of data visualization, but also in terms of producing research questions and beginning to tell stories about the past. So there were two main obstacles that I hit right away as I began this project. And the first one, of course, is the fact that all of the information on these cards is written in Russian, and my audience is primarily English speaking. So there's a whole process of going through and extracting all of the textual information as well as the pictorial information, translating everything, and creating a database for the whole set of cards. And that is not what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'd be happy to talk about that in Q&A, but what I want to focus on in this tutorial is the other piece of it, is the question of how you take a playing card or something that was tangible, that you held in your hand, that you could relate to in this really intimate way, bring it into a digital environment, and, as I said, make it not just accessible and discoverable, but really my focus was on making it usable. And so that is kind of the nut that I was trying to crack in this project. And it's the thing that led me to, through this experience of of bending but not breaking. And so that's kind of the guiding principle of what I want to talk to you about today. So I want to start with, I'm going to describe my encounter and the work that I did with really with three different open source apps, more or less open source. Omeka, which is a content management system, Scalar, which is a digital publishing tool, and Tableau, which is both has a license-based version, but it also has a public-facing version. And if you don't already know, Tableau is an excellent data visualization software, and it is available for free through educational licenses that are made available to both educators and to students. So it isn't technically open source, but it is free. And you get the full desktop version, and it's incredibly powerful. So what I want to describe for you and kind of walk you through the process of is how I began in one platform environment, thinking that there were all of these things I would be able to do, in fact, that I'd be able to do my project in one place in the digital world. And then I want to describe for you a couple of the moments where it became apparent to me that that just would not be possible, and that the app would have to bend or I would have to break. I would have, and what I mean by that is that I would have to compromise or change or shift the scope of what I was trying to accomplish. And sometimes that's perfectly fine. But every once in a while, I think it's good to stick to your guns and kind of force the software to bend to your will. So I'm going to describe the transition from Omeka to Scalar, and from the transition between Tableau and Scalar, and I'll point to one last little kind of flourish at the end to a fourth platform, also open source. So let me start this tutorial with where I started. Omeka might very well be familiar to you. I bet a lot of you have either heard of it or have actually used it. It's a content management system, and it excels at holding things, right? It can hold anything. It can hold a text, an image, a recording, an audio, a PDF, you name it. And that's one of the wonderful things about Omeka. And the other incredible thing about Omeka is that it was kind of designed to encourage you and to facilitate the capture of metadata about all of the things that it holds. And so it is Dublin Core. All kinds of metadata standards are available here. You can also build your own customized metadata fields, and often there is a need to do that, I think. So it is an amazing place to bring collections together, to bring your metadata together in a really systematic way, And there are all kinds of things that you can do with your stuff once you've got it in Omeka. So this was kind of a no-brainer place for me to start. I had this collection of all of these visual, of these cards, and I had all the image files, thanks to the Library of Congress. And I needed a place to put them and do things with them. So I uploaded them. I did a batch upload to Omeka, which was really a great first step. And I created a collection to hold these cards. And let me just show you that collection here. We're going to move from the back end view of Omeka to the front end view, which is the user kind of facing side of Omeka. So you can see I've got this collection of images, and I can click on any one of them. And Omeka is really, really good at presenting both the metadata on the left, right, and the files themselves. You can arrange them in lots of different ways. You can do things with them. There's a tagging system in Omeka. It is really customizable. One of the things that we've done at Harvard was to bring in the IIIF manifest capabilities, and that has allowed us to be able to work through really high resolution images in a really, really flexible and wonderful way. So that's a great thing about Omeka. But even if you can't do that or haven't done that in your instance of Omeka, Omeka has one of my favorite features of Omeka. One of the reasons I've been an advocate of it for a really long time is a plugin to Omeka that is called Neatline. Neatline is a plugin that enables you to create rich, interactive, rich media annotations for images, whether they're static images or georeferenced maps that you can feed into Neatline from anywhere else, wherever they're hosted. So it's really an incredible thing, and I want to show you very briefly just what it looks like, not how to create a Neatline exhibit, but what one looks like. And so I'm going to open one of mine up, and I'm not an expert designer or annotator, but I took a detail of an early 19th century map of a place that I know well, of Crimea. This is a tiny sliver of the southeastern coast of the Crimean Peninsula in the middle of the Black Sea, right? And this little bit of map is just chock full of an incredible amount of geographic and historical information. So this was a great kind of opportunity for me to exercise my skills as an annotator. And the great thing about Neatline, you'll notice right away that annotations in this environment don't just mean squares and circles and lines. You can get really, really in-depth with and really meticulous with the kinds of shapes that you're tracing, which is great. You can timestamp your material. You can build really interesting text dialogues and all of these things. You'll see here's an example of one here. This is the text blurb that I wrote up for Vineyards. And this could be packed with images and YouTube files and all kinds of wonderful things like that. But the point here is that Neatline really enables you to do a wonderfully fine-grained, customized version of annotation, much more so than a lot of other tools allow you to do, in a very easy way, very user-friendly way. I have my students, I use assignments in class all the time, and students can use Neatline very easily. So I thought, this is great. I can annotate the cards, I can talk about them, I can create stories from them right here in Omeka Neatline. But I ran into a problem. And this is a moment where it's not a question of there being a problem with Omeka. There's nothing wrong with the design. What I want to point you toward is, I think, the inevitability of the moment where what you have in mind or what you want to accomplish doesn't align with the design of the product that you're using. So this is one of those moments. For example, I have this bit of text about vineyards, right? And I started thinking to myself, well, I'm writing about vineyards now. And what happens is this annotation gets attached to that image, right? It's kind of like a little thing that gets tacked on, like a sticky note on that image. But that annotation doesn't have a life of its own. It doesn't exist as its own entry in Omeka, right? It's just a sticky note. And what I was thinking is, well, I'm writing about vineyards for this map. There might be an occasion where I'm working on another map and I have other things to say about vineyards. And what if I want to be able to connect them using a tag or some sort of relation? I want the work that I'm putting into those annotations, I think it should constitute an item in its own right. And I want those pieces of information that I'm bringing to the table to be part of this content of the project. I don't want them to be just sticky notes, right? I want them to be the equivalent, right, of the card from the point of view of the app. And I can't really do that in Omeka. And so this was a moment where I asked myself, okay, so is this a moment where I either try to break Omeka, right? I try to get in on the back end and customize and customize and customize and force Omeka to do something that it really didn't ever think of doing itself. Do I change my plan or do I look elsewhere? And I decided that the thing to do was to look elsewhere, right? To find another playmate in the playground, to use the metaphor that I kind of started using in the title of the talk. So I stumbled upon Scalar. Scalar is app number 2 in this list of 3 apps that I want to touch on today. Scalar is a digital publishing tool, and it has clear relations and kind of similarities with Omeka in certain ways. It too can hold lots and lots of different kinds of things, and likes to, especially things that are media, fall within the genres of media, still images and moving images and audio. Scalar was really designed to help people publish rich media, multimedia kind of narratives. So it's born to do that, which is fantastic. It does not share Omeka's obsessive love of metadata. Scalar can be flexible, and you can teach it, or you can create ways to build metadata into your content. You can do it, but it's not Scalar's first thought about what to do with your content. So it's just a difference, right? Different point of emphasis. Scalar also has an annotation capability, and I've already shown you neat lines. So I thought, okay, well, how does it work in Scalar? Because I know that this is a problem that I'm trying to fix. So let me show you what annotations look like in Scalar. Now you've just seen what they look like in Neatline. So this is a little page where I try to guide a user through reading one of these cards, even if you can't read Russian. So the idea is that I'm going to point out the parts of the card and explain what's going on in them. So if I rest my cursor on any one of these parts of the card, you'll see that there's kind of a light bluish square or rectangle that lights up, and there's an annotation there that explains what's going on. Now, if I move my cursor around the screen, you'll see that none of the shapes don't vary. They're all rectangular, right? The ability to create beautifully rendered geometries in your annotations is not there in Scalar. You can't control the color. You can't control how and when they highlight. All of that kind of texture of the annotation is missing in Scalar. So you're probably asking yourself, that's a pretty big cost, right? That's a pretty big price to pay. So what do you get in return? For me, in this case, I felt I was getting something pretty great in return. It might not be beautiful, but Scalar does exactly what it was I was hoping to do with my annotations. So here, for example, if I click on this annotation, it will bring me down to the file, and there are a list of all of the things. There are lists of all the things that I've chosen to say about this file. If I click on the title itself of the annotation, it will bring me to a content page. What this means is my little annotation, that little bit of text that I drew up, exists in Scalar not as a sticky note. It does exist as a sticky note, but it also exists as its own thing in the kind of information ecosystem of Scalar. And for me, this was really important because I wanted to open the door to my ability to connect an annotation I'm making on this card, for example, to an annotation I'm making on some other source elsewhere in my Scalar site. And one can do that by using tags, and all kinds of different relationship structures in Scalar. So for me, the inelegance of the annotation ability was kind of balanced or even outweighed by Scalar's ability to do what I wanted Omeka to do for me. So then the question is, do you have to, is it a zero-sum game, right? I uploaded all of my cards into Omeka. I've got all my metadata there. Do I have to kind of reinvent that wheel? Do I need to go through that whole process in Scalar? If I'm choosing to do if I'm choosing Scalar because the annotation method works for me, am I choosing not to use Omeka, right? Is it a zero-sum game? And the good news is that these apps really do play well together, kind of like children on the playground. Not necessarily children on the playground during the coronavirus pandemic. I have 3 kids, and I have noticed that they don't play as freely and openly yet with other kids on the playground because it still feels very strange. But in theory, children play well on the playground, and this is a case where they do. So happily, there is actually, with the click of a button, I know that sounds like an exaggeration, but with the click of just a couple buttons, because there are features in Scalar that allow you to do these kinds of things, there are utilities here where you can import content from other places. And the lovely thing is that Omeka is very happy to feed content into other places through its export capability. So I was able to bring all of my cards, all of those image files and metadata from Omeka into Scalar. Beautiful, right? Isn't that fantastic? So I'm getting the benefit of both worlds. I'm leveraging one and not losing the other, which makes me happy, right? As a digital humanist. So that solves one of my problems. So let me just spend a couple minutes talking about the other transition, the transition between Tableau and Scalar. So I went with Scalar because it enables me to create all kinds of texts, right? And do a lot of narrating and contextualization, and I can place different kinds of visual objects on the screen in different ways. Fantastic. I can relate things, I can use tags, and I'll show you just a little bit of what that looks like in a minute. But I'm also kind of a data person, and one of the things that I wanted my students to be able to do was to think of each card not just as a flat surface, both literally and metaphorically, but as a surface that is really, really kind of dense with information, right? All of which can be extracted from that card and used. So I did go through that process I mentioned at the beginning of pulling out all of the population data and the area data and all of the listing all of the economic activities represented on every card, and you name it, I put it into my database. And I wanted my students to be able to play with that data, to be able to filter and click and slide. And my natural place to do that when I'm not working in a GIS environment anyway is to come to Tableau. There are so many data viz tools and apps out there, and they all do wonderful things. Tableau just happens to be the one that I've been using the longest, so I'm really comfortable with it. Which is not to say that I'm an expert. It just means that I'm comfortable with it. I can do the things that I know how to do. But Tableau enables me to relatively easy build things like this, where I can say, I'd like to see, this is a visualization, a pair of visualizations that show the population of the empire. And if my students want to isolate just the provinces that are located in the basin of the Black Sea, they can do that. They have these interactive filters. They can find out which provinces had large populations, which had small populations. They can use these slider tools. They can do a lot of things, and I can separate out all the content. So it's a really active way of engaging with the cards. You can't really build any of that in Scalar, right? Tableau is really good at this. Tableau is not great at allowing a data visualization to really tell a story. There isn't as much space for narration and contextualization. That's not what it was built for. And that's okay, right? And so, but I found myself running up against this moment of saying, okay, I've built all of these visualizations in Tableau. I can't really recreate them in Scalar. Scalar does these other things really well that Tableau doesn't do. What now? Do I need to kind of break Tableau? And I tried that for a while. I tried using, they do have the ability to they have a storytelling capacity where you can create tabs. I found all kinds of ingenious ways to insert lots of text into the margins of my data visualizations. And it kind of worked, but it didn't work really well. It was never perfect. And so when I was working in Scalar and I had adopted Scalar, I decided, well, why don't I try to get Tableau and Scalar to play on the playground together, right? I mean, that has to be possible. I can't have to choose between the two. And of course you don't, which is a beautiful thing. So in my, on my page here, where I have my playing card project, we can scroll down and I have a section, it's a small section so far, I'm still building these things out, for visualizations. And I was able to come in here and, for example, I'll click on the gender visualization. The only way in which gender shows up on these geographic playing cards is that every once in a while you get a woman in the corner. So I decided I would code all of the provinces according to whether or not they showed men or women in the corners. And so I built a visualization in Tableau, and it is published to the cloud, and I pulled the embed code, which Tableau makes very easy. And I came into Scalar and I used the iframe, and it has full HTML capacity here in Scalar, so you can do anything you really want to do. And I embedded my visualizations here, and that made me very happy. They're loading a little bit slowly tonight, but that's okay. And I still can allow my students to do all the filtering that they want to do and querying, and I am able to also do things like build in embedded hyperlinked notes and context, and I can include images and use all of the power of Scalar to make the visualizations more accessible and more comprehensible. So that's a pretty kind of bare bones way or kind of typical way of getting apps to play nicely together, right? It's just with Omeka Scalar, it was a matter of exporting and importing, right? And playing to strengths. With Scalar and Tableau, it's really just it's a similar kind of thing, and it's actually just keeping information in Tableau and looking at it through Scalar, and using Scalar as a portal into Tableau and building things around it in Scalar, which is this, a slightly different model, but a very easy thing to do, but a gloriously easy thing to do because it allows you to bend and not break. Let me just show you really quickly how Scalar itself deals with the idea of data visualization, because it has its own native approach to that. So as I said, I tagged all of the content of the cards and used those as tags for the cards when I brought them into Scalar. So Scalar can do things like generate a tag cloud like this. And I'm going to go into the full screen version so you can see all of the geographical features that are noted on the playing cards. And I have bits of text that explain what people can do with a tag cloud and what they should be looking for and asking themselves and things like that. But one of the striking features here is that it seems that forests are terribly important in the Russian Empire, right? And they were. The playing cards are not lying to us. So we can click on Bountiful Forest and just see where that takes us. It takes us to a page that shows us the location of all the provinces where forests were marked as being important. We can add little bits of, kind of visual color from the playing cards themselves. And if we scroll down, here's the example of one of the kinds of native data visualization that Scalar offers. And you might say to yourself, she's showing me a circle composed of orange dots that is incredibly unexciting. And I would say to you, just wait for it. Bear with me, because it's not static and it's so much more than just orange dots. This is a visualization. The red dot in the center represents the tag forest, and all of those orange dots around it are the provinces that have been tagged as having forest. So it's, in a way, it's the same exact information that's shown at the top in the map in a different way. So what's so great about this? Well, what is so great about this is that I can say, it seems that bountiful forest is important in Arkhangelsk, and that's a really fun word to say. So I'm going to click on this orange dot and see what happens. And look at that, you get more dots, right? Which is a little bit overwhelming at first, but now I can see that Arkhangelsk is connected to the bountiful forest, right? And then it's tagged with all of these other things. And then I might say to myself, let's see what else might be in common, right? And there's fishing, there's Samoyedi are self-eaters or cannibals of the north. That's kind of interesting. Hunting and trapping. All of that is pretty interesting. I don't really know maybe I'll go with mountains. Why don't we click on mountains and see what that gets us? And it gets us more dots, which might seem completely unproductive, but I swear it's not. What we now have, if we pull these dots apart a little bit, and what you're looking at is a force-directed visualization of tagged material, tagged content, if that's what, the language you like. And what we now have, all of these little orange dots that are clustered together, are the dots that have at least two things in common. They all have bountiful forests, and they all have mountains represented on their playing cards. And so what we could then go and do is go and see where all of these provinces are. We could continue clicking to our heart's content and finding out a bit more about them and the things that are similar and the things that are dissimilar about them. One last thing that I will show you is that there are some really fun geographical features in the playing cards. And I happen to be partial to swamps for some reason. So I wanted to show you the swamps. And we can click here, and I think there are, if you have a little time, actually I'll just stop here, but there are really interesting things to be discovered about the swamps and the curative mud baths and the places where watermelon grow in the Russian Empire based on all of these little force-directed visualizations. So putting these things all together is great. The last little piece of the puzzle of the bending but not breaking was this. I wanted my users, my students or whomever, to be able to come to this project and play a game. And I don't know how to create games. Really, I'm not a gamer, but I did play solitaire growing up, and that happens to be the game. Patience happens to be the game that these cards were made to play. The idea was that you would lay them out on a flat surface, try to establish patterns, and sort them. And so I thought, could I recreate that in Scalar? I know I can have all of the images there. I could have all of the images showing in Omeka. But how do I enable a user to be able to click on an image and drag it around once they've decided that they want to put them in a certain order? This is the final moment of bend but don't break. Scalar can't do that, and Omeka can't do that, not natively. And I'm sure there's always a way with these apps to do enough kind of coding on the back end to make something happen, but for the most part, they're not meant to do these things, and I would probably have to break Scalar or break Omeka to enable that. But there are other little apps out there that can do it. And so I thought to myself, maybe I'd use one of those. And I tried it, and I imported all of my images into Padlet, which I only know about because of my first graders' experience in remote learning last spring using Padlet. I brought in all of those images to Padlet. You access them through Scalar, and here users can study the cards, decide what order they think they should be in. They can create their own version of the Padlet, and they can click, and they can drag, and essentially play patience with the playing cards exactly in the same way they would as if they were a nobleman or noblewoman lounging in their parlor, drinking tea and eating caviar in Moscow in 1856. And I thought that was pretty fantastic. So that's my little tutorial on bending but not necessarily breaking, and getting apps to play nicely with one another, allowing oneself to think outside the box and to embrace the idea of a little bit of inelegance in the kind of distribution of your material across different apps, and tolerating that, because what you can get in return is oftentimes something that's really, really close to what you had in mind in the first place, or possibly even better. So I'm going to stop there. I'm sure you have a lot of questions about the hows, not the whys, but maybe questions about the whys too. And I'd be happy to talk ad nauseum about those things within the context of the workshop, but also directly if you want to get in touch with me. You can find me at Canvas Empire. You can follow us on Twitter. We try to keep it entertaining and engaging, and I am very grateful for your attention and hope you will have fun on the playground. All right, take care.